government circles anyway, that RTE was really committed to the type of radical reform that was needed for an organisation going into this century. And I suppose you had people that had come up through the organisation that had been promoted into senior management, and there wasn't probably enough of outside thinking coming into it.
2 people have been killed and 28 others injured, 3 critically, in a mass shooting in the US city of Baltimore. Police say the victims are an 18-year-old woman and a 20-year-old man. Gunfire broke out at a block party in the south of the city in the early hours of this morning. No arrests have been made. The Mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott, has this warning for those responsible.
We will not stop until we find you, and we will find you. Until then, I hope with every single breath that you take, that you think about the lives that you took and you think about the lives that you impacted here tonight.
And that's your news. More in an hour.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Cheer on Leona and the European Solheim Cup team with Ryanair's low-fare flights to Malaga in September.
Sunny spells and scattered showers today, highest temperatures of 14 to 18 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now then, you're very welcome along. So the Sunday Paper Review, we are live in studio here with Shane Keegan of Cobh Ramblers. Shane, hello.
How are you, Joe?
Well, and Dion Fanning of The Currency. And of course, Free State, the podcast with Joe Brawley, Mr. Dion Fanning. Are you paid enough to talk to Joe Brawley for an hour and a half, hour once a week?
Yeah, well, you know, we're in constant negotiations about how much we're even going to speak to each other.
It's great. People love it. It's so good. I mean, it's just great conversation. So you must be delighted with the early reception.
It's great. No, it is. I'm delighted. It is good, and it's great when you can talk about things that you want to talk about and then find that people are happy to listen to what you're talking about. I'm still working on them. I want to talk about the Ashes with Joe Brawley. Okay. You know, I'm meeting some resistance. But I'm trying to push it. You know, there's an Australian, you know, there's an Australian and, you know, post-colonial angle that I'm working on. I'm sending him, you know, the occasional quote from Australians about what it means to beat England in England to see if he'll bite on
his
that.
appetite.
But
I had repeatedly told anybody who would listen to me that throughout our whole UEFA Pro License course, the best speaker, they had all these expert soccer speakers in for the UEFA Pro License course, and the best speaker we had throughout the Pro License was Pat Gilroy.
Really?
Yeah, he was outstanding.
Yeah.
He took a completely different approach. He came in without any PowerPoint presentation and said, I could talk for the next hour and a half and not tell you anything you want to hear. He handed around a piece of paper that we passed around between us. He said, everybody write down a question on that you'd like answered. And we passed it around. We all wrote down a question. We got back to him. He would try to go down and answer each question. It was a brilliant approach. Right. Absolutely brilliant approach.
Wow.
Wasn't it?
And took no preparation either. It's time management.
There you are.
Yeah, he was super. Yeah, he was great. Very impressive.
Yeah. No, he was incredible. Incredible stories.
Good man. I'll give you the back pages first of all. So the Sun have glimpsed of some of the football last night at Croke Park. Armagh chance gone a begging. So Rory Beggan making a save. Very dramatic in the end between Monaghan and Armagh. 20 penalties in the end, 17 of them scored, but it's Monaghan who prevail. And then Clifford's jackpot. So Jack O'Connor very happy to have David Clifford, Paudie Clifford, and a brilliant Kerry team on the evidence of yesterday. 218 to 12 points against Tyrone. Interesting story, bottom of the Sun. This is Mason Greenwood. Richard Moriarty reports has been offered a football lifeline by Jose Mourinho at Roma. It seems has reached out to Mason Greenwood to say come and play over here. And then Manchester United search for a goalkeeper very much ongoing because David De Gea is a target of Saudi Arabian club Al Nassr. Did you even have to ask? And Kelly Harrington there bites her European gold medal after her win yesterday. Sunday Independent, it's Sean O'Shea celebrating a stunning goal. I think it's stunning because of that David Clifford moment in the build-up, which people will remember for a very long time. O'Connor's delighted as Kerry laid down marker, and that was the sense yesterday, that Kerry had very much laid down a marker. A picture of, and I did feel really sorry for him, Callum Cumiskey. It's bad enough to have to miss one penalty in a shootout. To have to miss 2 is a lot more than unfortunate. So he's got his jersey over his head, and we see celebrating Conor McManus. So the headline is "The Agony and the Ecstasy." And Six Nations teams join rugby's new global contest. So this is very interesting if it happens. It will be Six Nations teams and Southern Hemisphere teams in a biennial tournament from 2026 in the July and November windows. So that would really spice things up on the front page of the Sunday Times. The Mail has Monaghan's celebrations as their main picture, top of the stops. The Mirror then have a picture of David Clifford leaving the pitch. Kerry very happy. O'Connor hails Clifford's skill but insists Kerry are no one-man team. And he did only score 1 point from play yesterday. David Clifford and Kerry were still very good. So I think that's performance of the championship thus far. Still tight-ish between Derry and Cork. Derry 4 points, Cork 2 points. On the GAA theme, couple of pieces on GAAGO which bowed out as of yesterday. That was the final tranche of games for GAAGO. So Eamon Sweeney on the back page of the Sunday Independent and Mick Clifford in the Sunday Times. I would say they both feel that this GAAGO situation is far from locked in and done and has no questions to answer. I'll give you the gist of Eamon Sweeney. He starts off by saying the GAAGO deal and the RTE pay scandal are two sides of the same coin: arrogance, greed and entitlement. So you get a sense early on of where he's going with this. So in short, he talks about Ireland at the moment ripping people off. Landlords rack rent tenants, hotels inflate rates when there's a big event in town, energy companies jack up prices, etc. Much of national unhappiness stems from the constant shaking down of those who must pay. The GAA, which will rake in millions from this weekend alone, adopted the same approach by conspiring with RTE to keep yesterday's 2 games off terrestrial television. Kerry's clash with Tyrone should have been available to all. It was a knockout tie between the last 2 All-Ireland football champions, and as compelling a matchup as this year's competition is likely to produce. If that's not worth showing, what is? He says, saying that RTE are showing more games than ever is a weak argument. People don't expect every game to be televised, but they do expect games like Kerry Tyrone or Clare Limerick and Cork Tipperary to be shown. Quality matters as much as quantity. And he mentions how the Tailteann Cup semis were very much on show on RTE, whereas the preliminary quarterfinals were on GAAGO. He says that was indefensible. That they eventually showed Mayo Galway shows they knew this themselves. The original call suggested RTE felt their primary duty was to the GAA hierarchy rather than the viewer. And he says finally, a streaming service does make sense for provincial championship games or when there's a packed programme, but the quarterfinals were the only 2 matches yesterday. Putting both on GAAGO shows that RTE and the GAA's real intention is to create their own version of Sky box office. He finishes by saying GAA must go. RTE needs to free itself from this clammy embrace. The GAA would be better off out of it. And he does earlier on note David Clifford pretty much played once free to air this year, and once this month is done, it's Rugby World Cup, it's a Women's Soccer World Cup, it's Six Nations, it's Premier League, all taking centre stage. And the GAA used to be concerned about competition from other sports. Now it cedes half the summer to those sports and it hides away its big games. Maybe they believe the games are so popular the nation will keep supporting them no matter what. Fianna Fáil and the Catholic Church used to think like that. It's a fair summation of Eamon Sweeney's take on GAAGO.
Yeah, it's. I wouldn't disagree with it, and I think when you start, when you're saying about what will GAAGO look like going forward, which there was a talk a while ago about there will be a review of how it's worked, but I think when you're looking in the papers today and you're saying what we're dealing with is what will RTE look like going forward. Like we're into a situation where Eamon links the two, and he's right. And I was writing about this in the Examiner yesterday as well, and it's the same point that you can't separate what's happened this week over the last 10 days on RTE with like the GAAGO in many ways encapsulates, and Mick Foley mentioned this as well, that tension between public service broadcasting and the commercial revenue that RTE pursue, as we've seen, in ways that, like we saw this week in the Oireachtas Committee, they pursue that commercial revenue in ways that are kind of have had no oversight, have been like extraordinary to most people looking in, and one supports the other in a way that seems unsustainable now. And when it comes to GAAGO, as it is with, like, you know, Eamon Sweeney mentions it there. I was struck looking back this week on what was said during the original GAAGO controversy, and Virgin made this statement, and I know the GAA rebutted some of it, but one that they said was the RTE now have more games than they know what to do with. Now, how we've got into that position, and this is why the thing is linked as well. You have RTE hoarding their talent by paying them more money than they would get anywhere else, hoarding advertisers by entertaining them in a way that, again, there was very little oversight over, and then hoarding games by asking a license fee payer to pay twice to watch games. And this is a fundamental flaw in GAAGO from the RTE point of view. It was fine when it was for the diaspora, when there were people who want to see games. And I, you know, when I lived in London, I would go down to, you go down to the sort of the Irish pub to watch matches, all that kind of stuff. But the Irish diaspora aren't paying a license fee. You're now asking people who pay a license fee to pay again to RTE. Now, if you think there's no difference between that and paying Sky, well, then you don't really. Then there's no point in public service broadcasting. Because if you believe in public service broadcasting, and RTE use it as a shield so often, and one of their lines, and if you even go back to that Rugby World Cup story, when they defended that, they will say that they are required to maximise their commercial revenue in pursuit of public, to fulfil their remit of public service broadcasting. That clearly they got carried away with that, and it is a flawed concept. If you believe in the things if you believe in public service broadcasting, then it shouldn't be on an RTE-owned station.
Eamon Sweeney's piece is very much about the absence of big names and big teams on terrestrial television, whereas Mick Foley, I think, is more concerned with your point in the main, Dion. The headline of his piece is RTE needs to clarify its role in modern media landscape, and so he says the question whether RTE holding a chunk of pay-per-view business is a suitable arrangement for a public service broadcaster already showing other games free to air in a tiny media landscape will surely come into that debate. And that is a key question. Now, there's going to be an Oireachtas committee, which generally solves all of our problems in life, of course. July 12th, the future of sports broadcasting. I think this was prompted on the back of the GAAGO controversy when it arose at the start of the season. So I think RTE and Virgin and everybody concerned really will be at that hearing. But I suppose people have really been struck by the conflict of interest, whereby there are board members on GAAGO who are very much of RTE, and if there's a juicy game, are you fighting tooth and nail for the licence fee payer, or are you thinking, God, that could really help GAAGO, which I also have an obligation to, and need that to be a success? And that is a real conflict.
You couldn't possibly argue that it's not a conflict of interest. I mean, what sane argument can they give, and what argument are they going to try and give in that Oireachtas committee report? Like, first of all, I found that I didn't know that was coming up. That will be interesting to see how that goes now, as you say, whether anything actually real comes out of something like this, other than TDs getting a chance to fight for their corner of the country. There'll
be some grandstanding for sure. I think in some ways that quelled the controversy a little bit, because it was just bubbling, and Declan McBennett was on the 6-1, and it was, well, who's going to be interviewed next? And then it was Oireachtas going to look into this July 12th, and that seemed to smooth things over in the short term.
Well, I think there was brought up in the Public Accounts Committee on Thursday as well. I think Alan Dillon, in one of the many things that the RTE executives were asked to bring back in the coming week, they were asked for, can we see the subscriber numbers for GAAGO? Okay. So they promised to come back with them, along with lots of other things. Now, it shows that it is in that committee conversation for the week after, but it's also in people's thinking in regards to this. And I think ultimately it's going to be overtaken by what we're going to see, which is, I think, looking very much like some kind of breakup of RTE. And I think that's, GAAGO will maybe be a casualty of that, and I think it should be, because one of the things that, and we're speaking on a commercial platform, so like none of us comes without an interest in this area if you work in media, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who said, we're in the wrong business. And I said, well, no, we're actually in the same business. Like, that's the problem. Like, we're actually in, when you look at the RTE, we're in the same business, but everything, like, is so geared towards, like, this conversation has been so much about RTE, without saying, like, RTE affects in a way that is disproportionate every other media organisation in the country. And, when people say this thing about the high earners and, about GAAGO and about the advertisers, it's useful on where would they go? That's fine, but actually maybe we should be asking, why isn't there somewhere else for them to go? Why has RTE sucked everything in a way that isn't just about public service broadcasting? Because people are doing public service broadcasting in journalism, in journalism outlet, newspaper outlets, broadcast radio outlets across the country that isn't supported by a licence fee. That's fine, but they don't have a monopoly. They have a monopoly on a lot of things, but they don't have a monopoly on good journalism. And yet they've pulled everything in, and including rights. I think even going beyond GAAGO, I think there was a few years ago, I think somebody at Virgin said, is it right that so many of the top 20 sporting events are appearing on RTE? Like, how have we let this, now it's changed a bit obviously with, the rugby, but again, I think this conversation initially it seemed immediately it's going to be more than about Ryan Tubridy. It's going to be at how RTE is structured. And I think when they start getting into that, we will actually look at how the media is structured in response to that. Because there's an awful lot of challenges for the media that go way beyond, fixing RTE isn't going to solve the challenges the media face. But in a small country like Ireland, they have been allowed to kind of take up, get too much control over so many things without the oversight, as we saw this week, that they probably should have.
Look, it's not, obviously, Joe, even when we were talking about what we were going to chat about today, it's not a new argument, it's not a new discussion, it's been going on a bit of time now at this stage, but I do think both Foley and Sweeney do make a couple of good points on it. I mean, I like Damon's line that subscribing to Sky is a choice, but subscribing to RTE is a legal requirement. I mean, that's where we're at. I would regard myself as fairly logical and less emotional, and having spent 15-20 years in commercial advertising, I would see the need that the dollar rules and that decisions are going to be based on that. And yet I must have had my head buried in the sand for the week, because I was literally driving home yesterday to head back to watch Kerry and Tyrone when it dawned on me, is this actually on TV? And then checking and finding out it wasn't. I was livid. I was livid, I swear. It just that's what took over. The emotion just took over inside me. I was like, what? I don't know, do I get locked up upon leaving the building if I say I went looking for somebody else's GAAGO login details? Was the only way I could find around to try.
Well, you see, but that is a thing as well, and like this is a broader, and this is more true the GAA side of it, that it was always like the Sky deal was going to bring in people. It was taking money from people. Maybe GA people are going to pay it as well, but you're actually getting Sky's money and Sky subscribers' money. The casual sports fan, that money was going towards the GAA, whereas this thing was structured like the casual sports person, or not the casual, but the kind of I'm not going to get a GAAGO subscription. I'm just not like, it's not like I would now, again, like you yesterday, I was like, I want to watch Kerry Tyrone.
Yep.
And I was going to go, and then I got sucked into the cricket, which we will talk about. But
True Gale.
Yeah. But I did. But I wanted to watch it, and again, you feel. But I was like, I'm not going to. And the way the match played out, I was glad I hadn't spent a one-off fee to watch it. But, I'm not going to do that. Whereas the people, you're making demands of the people who are most committed. Like that was one of the big flaws from the point of view of the GAA, which is hugely admirable in terms of how they actually see themselves. And then to say right now, the most committed people, the people who get most out of the GAA, who want to watch the most, who want to watch Gaelic games the most, we're going to go to you first. And maybe somewhere down the line in a quarter-final stage, we'll pick up a few people among the more casual supporters. But first and foremost, the people we want to get the money from are the people who really want to watch it. And that was flawed from the GAA's point of view. And RTE, they can't have their hand. I've written about this before. They had Paddy Power sponsorship of their football coverage. They got a rap in the knuckles previously for Paddy Power sponsorship of a Ryan Tubridy programme. I was reading in the paper today about how Paddy Power was a client of Noel Kelly as well. Like that's an interesting aspect of that. But they've done things in pursuit of this dual funding that you would ask, is that right for a public service broadcaster? And again, we're all in a small market, so you can be accused of speaking with a vested interest, but there are certain things that a public service broadcaster should be doing as a public service broadcaster, and the Gaelic game, owning a pay-per-view station really doesn't seem to fit with that.
For clarity, Paddy Power perfectly entitled to be working with Noel Kelly or anything.
Totally entitled to be working.
Is he fit to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. No, but I think the rap in the knuckles was that it hadn't been made apparent, declared, made apparent when Ryan Tubridy was interviewing Paddy Power at Cheltenham.
Okay.
That their involvement in the show. Not with Noel Kelly, that wasn't... Anything you want to add, or you?
Yeah, look, I suppose the only again, the Sweeney article just makes a mention of the Kerry Eye editor Sylvester Hennessy's comments, and I know it might seem like such an easy argument to make, the whole "what about me poor father who can't turn on the laptop." But what about me poor father who can't turn on the laptop? I think it is a reasonably legitimate kind of argument to make as well, that even if you, in some cases, Dion's talking about going after the people who have the want, going after the diehards. What if you have the want, you're the diehard, you have the financial resources to be able to pay for it as well, but you're just actually not able to? It's not, you don't know how to stream things. You're not going to sit down and watch something on a laptop.
Not unsympathetic to that point, but how many people are we talking about?
My father would know. I'd forget about it if I was trying to explain to my father how to watch that game on GAAGO yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not unsympathetic to it, but it is often used, and I just wonder.
I'd say there's a fair proportion out there, I would think, still, who would definitely struggle with that idea. Or
rely on family members to help them out. No, fair enough.
And Joe, again, if I'm just whinging and cribbing about things here and the RTE monopoly on events and that, just from somebody who's a neutral in the whole thing, it does lead me to think about people in your situation where the GAA coverage, I thought, of the live games on here was absolutely fantastic. They then disappeared. When you're looking at all of this going on from your perspective, it has to get you a bit annoyed and angry and agitated as well.
I wouldn't have the company of you and Dion if we had commentary of this match now. So
you'd have been cute enough to wait for the second one anyway.
Blessing.
I think
there's a blessing.
You definitely would have been cute enough to wait for the second one.
Well, let's park it. And that committee is on July 12th, so this thing is going to bubble right up again in a couple of weeks' time. Just two interviews side by side. I don't know if they're great discussion points necessarily, but I think you'd have to say kudos to the Sunday Times for getting them, because they're interesting and they're a bit different. So one is Don McLean talking to Jessica Harrington, because today is the Dubai Duty Free Irish Derby Day, and Harrington has a horse where she's hoping to win the race, Spraywell. But I suppose it's more her battle with cancer over the last 9 months, which looms large. Don McLean does a great job of just charting her rise as a trainer started in the 1980s. Back then, a female trainer was a rare thing, and when owners would call to ask about their horses, they would often ask to speak to Jessica's husband, the late and much missed Johnny Harrington. That soon changed, and he lists off the achievements of Harrington, which go on and on. She won the Galway Hurdle in 1994 with Oh So Grumpy, the Ladbroke Hurdle in 96 with Dance Beat, won the Midlands Grand National in 1998 with Miss Orchestra, and then won just about everything with Moscow Flyer. And it's been success after success. She has embraced flat racing in recent times, and Don says predictably she's reached the very top level there too. She has finished in the top 5 in the Irish Flat Trainers Championship every year since 2017. But the past 9 months very difficult. Dealt a sledgehammer blow in October, diagnosed with breast cancer. She said, I reckoned when I was being diagnosed that it was going to be cancer. I was ready for it. So when we get the results, when the doctor said stage 3, stage 4, aggressive, I was okay. This is your program, he said. This is how we're going to beat it. And I was up for it. I was helped by the fact I was healthy before I started the treatment. And I knew I was going to have a positive attitude. You don't want to be negative. You don't want to give cancer a chance. It helped too that I live in a wonderful place. So 16 rounds of chemotherapy. She plays it down, writes Don McLean, but she was in hospital numerous times with lung issue or clot or various hurdles, but recent tests all came back negative after chemotherapy. So she starts a 3-week run of radiotherapy next. That starts on Wednesday, and then she'll have immunotherapy until the start of October. But Don McLean says she is strong and sharp and healthy and well, and she will be at the Cobh this afternoon. Again, it's not a great discussion point in the way GAAGO was, but it's an interesting piece, good piece.
Yeah, I suppose I'll be honest on this, Joe. I probably hadn't turned to this article until you sent through the text yourself, just kind of highlighting it. It definitely was one that I enjoyed. I suppose I am the son of a strong, independent woman who works in a male-dominated world, who has also come through breast cancer. So there was serious kind of parallels, and I can see every inch of my mother in this as I'm reading through it. And for that reason alone, I thought it was excellent. Look, she's a remarkable woman, so she is. There's no doubt she's a remarkable woman before she had to battle through breast cancer. That's for sure already in the things that she achieved in her professional life. But yeah, I'll tell you, she's not somebody you'd get the better of. I'd be pretty sure. Be you a rival or be you cancer.
Curious to know what the response was when they asked back in the 80s, could they speak with her husband? I presume she said no.
Again.
Yeah, I'd say it was met with the same kind of response. Like, no, it is, and it's extraordinary, and it's not. I don't know. Like, I only know Jessica Harrington from seeing her interviewed, at race meetings and things like that. But it doesn't. Her approach to dealing with this seems entirely, just in keeping. Having a plan,
100%.
And anyone who knows anyone who's gone through it, like, it's extra. When you just see the 16 rounds of chemotherapy, like, it's the way just trying to keep yourself healthy, avoid infections, all these things that are the awful grind of having that illness.
I would say, Dion, like you would say, like, the concept of poor me, I'd say never once ever entered that woman's head.
No.
Do you know what I mean? There was pity parties were never ever going to be entertained. It's right, what's the process for getting through the other side of this, and let's rock on and do it.
Because the papers are full actually of interviews from the various media days over the past week of Republic of Ireland female footballers, and quite a few of them are saying they didn't really have role models growing up. So it's kind of interesting. You see very quietly Jessica Harrington's been doing her thing since late 80s, early 90s, and still going strong, thankfully. Just beside that, again, this is one of those pieces I would have flicked by it, and I came back to it, and I flicked by it, and I came back to it, and with Wimbledon starting this week, I would be unaware, really, as a very casual tennis fan these days, increasingly, of Daria Kasatinka. I'm butchered her name, I'm sure. So she's tennis world number 11 seed at Wimbledon, and she's the Russian number 1 tennis player. And because we tend to highlight the high-profile players or footballers or various sports people who don't speak out against Russia. But in fairness to her, this is really remarkable. So Daria Kazazinka, she's at the start of the interview, a Ukrainian spectator comes up to her in one of the warm-up events for Wimbledon and gives her a big hug and commends her for her courage. And so you kind of think, well, that's interesting. She's the number one Russian player, and she has been very overt in criticising the country, and it's come at significant personal cost. She said she's 26 years old. I want to be able to respect myself when I look in the mirror, and if being a good person means I have to sacrifice my home, that's my choice. And she mentioned the person hugging her, and she said it meant a lot to me. So she's won 6 WTA titles, world ranking of 11. She has very much disavowed Vladimir Putin. She's come out publicly as well last summer as gay, and that brought a harsh and enduring spotlight in her home country. It's unsafe for me now with the regime we have. As a gay person who opposes the war, it is not possible to go home. But I don't regret it even 1%. When the war started, everything turned to hell. I felt very overwhelmed. I just decided, F it. Couldn't hide anymore. I wanted to say my position on the war and my sexuality, which was tough coming from a country where being gay is not accepted, but I felt like I had a backpack of stones on my shoulders and I just had to throw it off. Afterwards, I faced a few consequences, but the only thing that worried me was my parents. They are fine and they're proud of me. And so she is still kind of been ignored by Ukrainian players. Like, that's been bullying away in the tennis circuit. So in the main, they're not shaking hands, but one player did offer her a thumbs up at the French Open, which she really appreciated. And then her own kind of stories, amazing. She's from a town called Tolyatti, industrial city, 500 miles from Moscow. Organised crime after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of drug problems. And her parents, when she was 12 years of age, sold her house to help her pursue her tennis dream. Imagine at 12, your parents selling their house. She says it was difficult to accept that kind of pressure. No kidding. One year we spent $6,000 on visas alone. She has subsequently earned 8 million sterling and counting in prize money. So, again, I would have flicked by both these pages when I initially scanned the papers, but they're both worth touching on, and I will be looking out for her at Wimbledon, which I guess is kind of the point of these pre-Wimbledon pieces.
The bit about the Ukrainian players not shaking her hand felt so unfair.
Yeah.
It really did. That was...
You're Russian, end of. But maybe they don't realise she's spoken out as much as she has.
Possibly not, because you're reading it and, you're kind of forming a relationship with her as you're reading the piece, and she comes across as such an impressive individual that, to completely tar somebody just because of their nationality like that. But look, then again, I'm not in a great position. I'm not going through what Ukrainian people are going through, but it did seem very unfair based on the individual we're speaking about. Yeah,
they might continue to warm. If they gave her a thumbs up in Roland Garros, it might extend to a handshake at Wimbledon. But it is impressive, Dion.
It is, and I think, what you say about it is actually one of those pieces where you will, having read it, sit up and kind of go, okay, I'm going to pay attention. And like you, like the ranks of tennis players is becoming so uninspiring at the moment. Something like Wimbledon that you would, historically look forward to. You kind of need something like this. You need something to go, okay, there's somebody I can now look out for and get attached to in some way. Because there isn't a lot, it doesn't excite really the way it did, it's an extraordinary story, and I'd have some sympathy for Ukrainian, a lot of sympathy for Ukrainians maybe, Shane, who decide not to, because their starting point is what Russia has done to their country. But
on the broader question, is it our age, or is it the lack of personality? Why I was massive into tennis when I was younger. Massive into tennis when I was younger. I could not tell you who's who on the circuit now.
Yeah, I suppose it's the aftermath of the kind of the big beasts kind of fading away, and I guess there hasn't been I started watching I've started watching that Netflix tennis thing, and I was like,
still
this is not. I know why every organisation and every sporting body wants to do these, but I would advise you not to do this because narcissistic tennis players, it just was a really tough watch.
apparently the Tour de France one is good.
Yeah, that's why I haven't watched it yet. I'm saving that.
Well, Daria Kasatkina is her name, so keep an eye out maybe at Wimbledon. Let's go to Cobh Park and just get the half-time situation between Derry and Cork. Paddy Andrews is there. What are we at half-time, Paddy?
Yeah, Derry are slight lead. It's 6 points to 5 to Derry. It's been cagey enough. Cork have been pretty good though, I have to say. We said they'd probably come up a little bit short in terms of their firepower up front. That's been the case. They've had opportunities, but they've had 6 wides. But for John Cleary and Cork, I mean, Derry raced into at one stage in the first half they were 3 points clear, but Cork have got the last couple of scores of the first half. They'll be really, really happy how this first half has gone. They're shooting into Hill 16, which, as we said beforehand, there is a bit of a breeze there. It's the trickier goal to shoot into, hence maybe why they've had those 6 wides. Derry have been okay, but like Shane McGuigan hasn't scored from play. Tommy Watts is doing a great job on him. Derry scores have come from that half forward line. Paul Cassidy and Ethan Doherty have got 2 points each, but it's been, you just get the sense Derry are playing in third gear, and Cork would possibly even be frustrated that they're not ahead in this game so far.
Okay, I'm chatting here with Shane and Dion, so I'm not seeing it in great detail. Anytime I glance up, there's plenty of numbers between man in possession and goal. I doubt we've had a goal chance, have we?
Cork they've kind of been knocking at the door with runners coming from deep, but it's that final pass, that little bit of clinical edge up front is deserting them a little bit. There hasn't really been a clear cut chance, but to be fair, if you were saying who's more likely in terms of just getting into the right positions, it probably is Cork. So as I said, it's Derry are leading, but they'll definitely need to up the gears here if they want to try and pull away from Cork, which I still feel they might. Yeah. But it's been relatively impressive from Cork. It's just that little bit of precision up front is letting them down, but it's a tight one. It's lots of bodies behind the ball, as we said, but Derry just with their noses in front, 6 points to 5 at half time.
Okay, very good. Paddy Andrews, thank you at Cobh Park. Derry just ahead. Updates from Paddy across the course of that second half, and then we'll build up to Dublin Mayo with Paddy as well before 4. We'll take a very short break. Sunday pay-per-view continues in just 1 moment.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.
Retirement is not an end. With the right support and allowing yourself some time for imagination, it can be the start of something new, your second life. This weekend on News Talk, we're partnering with Standard Life, one of Ireland's leading pensions providers, to offer you an exciting opportunity to plan for your second life. Whether you're 7 years or 7 months from retiring, there's always time to reflect on what you want in your second life. So, to celebrate your future, we've got an unforgettable retreat for 2 at the luxurious Monart, plus €400 cash to give away this weekend. See newstalk.com/Second Life for full details. Standard Life International DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Hi, I'm Ken Doherty. For all van drivers and business owners, InsureMyVan.ie is Ireland's low-cost van and commercial insurance specialist. For high-quality van and all commercial insurances, call InsureMyVan.ie.
City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as InsureMyVan.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Over recent months, we've all been dealing with the reality of rising energy costs, and we've all been making changes to reduce our energy use. However, if you are having trouble paying your energy bills, be sure to talk to your supplier as soon as possible. There are a range of protections in place for customers. Organisations such as MABS and Alone can also help. For information on these and all other supports available, visit gov.ie/reduce your use. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.
Start your summer in style with a dream break at the Sleeve Russell Hotel, Cavan. Discover our stunning makeover, luxury bedrooms, exquisite restaurants and relaxing bars. Explore 300 acres of scenic landscapes, walks and lakes, and enjoy everything our resort has to offer, from spa and swimming to golf, tennis, kids club and more. Experience Ireland's hidden heartlands just 90 minutes from Dublin. Book now at sleeverussell.ie.
Feeling tired?
Run down? Want to feel young and vibrant?
Need a guaranteed pick-me-up?
Forever Young Festival will take you back in time.
Simply the best weekend possible.
As we take you back to the hedonistic 80s.
Over 30 original 80s bands.
More fun than you can shake a shamrock at.
Unbeatable feel-good vibes.
It's the grown-up party of the summer.
Don't miss it.
14th to the 16th of July.
In Palmerstown House, Kildare.
Tickets from €79.
From foreveryoungfestival.ie.
Only 2 weeks till the festival.
Share, stream, download and connect more with Ireland's best value 5G prepay offer on Air Mobile. For just €20 top-up, you can get no limits data, unlimited calls, unlimited texts and 5G at no extra cost, meaning you can connect faster, stronger and better than before. Now that's a no-brainer. To switch to Air Mobile, go in store or visit air.ie. Subject to €20 top-up every 28 days. Fair usage applies. For full terms, see air.ie.
What makes us love our county so fiercely, despite all the summers of hurt? What lifts us back up year after year after year? What stirs such passion in our hearts and brings us out in our thousands? It's something intangible, deep in our veins. It's our county. It's our people. It's in our blood. AIB, the toughest. Proud sponsors of the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Now you're welcome, Max. So we're going through the Sunday Papers. Dion Fanning and Shane Keegan are here. Just a touch, can I rudely drag you to golf for just 2 minutes? Because I just enjoyed Westwood and Poulter. Have a bit of this world. We were right all along is the general vibe of this interview. So there are two golf pieces, because what's happened here is that LIV Golf is just over a year old, and obviously there's been the big merger. And what's more, they are at Valderrama at the moment. Now, Valderrama is like where the 1997 Ryder Cup was on. You know, Seve's spiritual homeland in some respects. He was the captain. And it is, for the European Tour, was just one of those real mainstay stops, akin to Wentworth. You know, Valderrama, great course, tradition. And so what did LIV do? They snuck in last year and they said to Valderrama, do you want to host our event instead and kick the European Tour to the curb? And Valderrama said, well, yes, we do. So generally, it's the first European stop. They'll be in London next week. So there's a couple of pieces. Ewan Murray has gone over to Valderrama, and Tom Kershaw went over to Valderrama as well. He's interviewed Poulter and Westwood. Ewan Murray, first of all, his is more just an assessment of where they are. And I mean, in fairness, if you want to see why LIV is making some inroads, I don't know if the audience is big, but LIV has taken over Valderrama, famous Spanish venue, intrinsically linked to the European game. Open champion Cameron Smith is here. So is US PGA champion Brooks Koepka. There's also Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Graham McDowell, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, Henrik Stenson, Garcia, Patrick Reed, Bryson DeChambeau. Whereas the British Masters is the European Tour offering this week, and it basically has Justin Rose and zero star power is the truth. And if you watch the PGA Tour this week, the Rocket Mortgage Classic in Detroit, zero star power. So like the best golf tournament on this week, if you park any issues, is the LIV event, and like by a distance. So post-merger, Ewan Murray finds all the LIV players kind of pretty happy. So Paul Casey signing autographs. Look at this. And he says, the edginess is gone, the uncertainty is gone. Martin Keimer, I'm proud of my decision. We got a lot of SH1T from the media, from people who didn't know that much about it. We got so much crap from them. But there's a real vibe of, look at us now. So that's the mood that Ewan Murray finds. And then Tom Kershaw interviews in matching t-shirts, because they both play for the Majestics, one of the teams on LIV, Westwood and Poulter. It's great stuff. They're just, Westwood's 50, Poulter's 47. They got 20 million each to join the breakaway tour. Poulter, I've worked tirelessly to provide. I don't feel guilty for earning good money. People have said, haven't you earned enough money? Aren't your kids going to have enough? What gives them the right to tell me what's enough? We'd all like to earn more, and if you don't think that, I think you're lying. When I was born, no one stamped on my arse how much money I was allowed to earn.
This is a statement Ryan Tumberly needs to come out and make.
Poulter, by the way, it's funny. He is talking here about the fact that the European Tour imposed a fine on players for leaving the European Tour and going to a rival tour, which took them to court and trying to take them down. He said, I asked for releases to play global golf for 25 years and I was never denied one. So then to be denied one and fined for these events, it's just extremely unfair. He says, again, not realising that the LIV Tour is trying to destroy the European Tour in many ways. The biggest disappointment, he says, has been hung out to dry, not being part of the Ryder Cup. Again, the Ryder Cup is a European Tour event, and he's like, it's a disgrace I'm not in the Ryder Cup team. It's absolute shambles, It's a massive disappointment. I played in 11, Ian's played in 7, said Lee Westwood. There's just a sense that they have been screwed over, that they were right all along. The reason I sleep well is because my kids will be the ones to judge me at the end of the day. I know what I've done. I know what I've done in the Ryder Cup, and I feel comfortable. That's why I sleep 10 hours a night, says Ian Poulter. I mean, the most remarkable thing is that anyone in the world sleeps 10 hours a night, but Poulter does. And Westwood says of his legacy, he doesn't care about his legacy, it's just an opinion. I couldn't give two hoots what someone else says. When I'm on my deathbed, this is what Steve Peters, the psychologist, has advised him to how to frame things. My family won't be saying, yeah, he's a great golfer, could have been a better putter, or will they say he was a good dad, always looked after us, always cared for us. That's what matters. So I'd say they're buoyant. Like the merger has happened. It's a two fingers to everyone. We've made lots of money and we don't care. And like the human rights thing, there's a real sense of, why would you bring that up? I mean, that's not even a thing to bring up anymore.
Well, that's we see the thing that exactly, because that's everybody's problem now. You know, it's no longer their problem.
Yeah.
And like, you know, Westwood, like the two of them, like Westwood, you know, his complete inability to deal with those questions at the original LIV press conference was astounding. Like that he hadn't seen, you know, and the way the absolute PR disaster that was that press conference.
My favourite from those was when it was the two of them side by side, and one of the journalists said, "As Cork maybe score a goal, no, it's wide, still 8-5 Derry." Said it was either to Poulter or Westwood, but there was a degree of Ian, is there anywhere you wouldn't play? Like, would you play in apartheid South Africa? Would you play in Putin's Russia? I don't have to answer that question.
It was a hypothetical, yeah.
And then Westwood said it's hypothetical. Poulter was, yeah, it's a hypothetical. I don't have to answer a hypothetical question. That's the rule, right? No one has to answer a hypothetical question about anything. So a year on to see them both like all smiles.
Well, yeah. Well, also like as you know, if you want to know the question, like who won in the LIV versus, you know, the establishment,
yeah,
this is your answer.
Oh, and here's a cheat for the listeners. They really don't need to read the article. Just have a look at the photo. Just have a look at the photo, because if you ever needed to see two cats that got the cream, you've got the two of them smiling out at you in their lovely tops there.
All that's missing in the bottom corner is a picture of Rory McIlroy looking sad.
Yeah.
But it's funny, they say Rory
you have a Rory comment,
yeah,
don't
they do.
Yeah.
My relationship with Rory is as good as it always was. Poulter says he's still a friend.
That cannot be the case.
There is that air. That's like, again, another person who you know, has that air of the kind of Richard Keys blog. You know, even the 10 hours, like, you know, the 10 hours a night. That's classically somebody who thinks, actually I sleep 7 hours, but if I say 7 hours, will people question? Like, is a bit in kind of a grey area? So I better be more emphatic and say 10 hours. You know, you're right, nobody sleeps 10 hours a night past the age of 7. And you know, but like, it's just it is just that kind of, you know, with the actual, the thing they have that Richard Keys doesn't have is that they don't have any, they've actually got, everything is fallen for them.
Yeah, they actually have one.
Yeah, they have one, whereas, you know, Keysy has that sense of injustice.
Well, look, recently married last week, he's happy.
Yeah,
you know,
he brought out a corker of a blog in the wake of that.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I must read that. Actually, the one I think I would have no problem incorporating the Keys blog into the Sunday paper but that would be the only exception. So yeah, look, that's the LIV vibe from Paul Casey signing autographs, turning to a journalist saying, "Look at this! Like we're here to." Yeah. Poulter and Westwood.
Like Poulter basically just stopped short of saying Rory's just going to have to suck it up, isn't he?
No, it is basically, if you remember Spinal Tap, when if you ever saw that movie Spinal Tap, when the manager got deposed and the girlfriend of one of the band members took over, and then at the end of the movie he's back in charge, and his trademark was a cricket bat, and he's there standing at the back of the concert watching the band play, and he's just sitting there with the cricket bat in his hand, back in control of the empire. And this is Poulter and Westwood here, totally in control, masters of all they survey.
Yes, stop cramming in cricket references. I'll let you talk about the Ashes, I promise. It's like I feel like you're Darren Brown here, sowing seeds psychologically with me.
He's told me outside he's actually scheduled his whole working week around the Ashes.
Well, you know, as I work
for
myself these days, I can do that.
I'm looking at the ad situation. So is 7 minutes enough, Ashes, or do you need more time?
Well, I can do it. I think being here. I have to say, you talk about if you had GAA coverage. As you said that, I was like, again, another reason to despise how the media has been organised in Ireland. Because I was like, the minute I agreed to this, I was like, this is a terrible mistake. Oh, this is the 5th day of the Ashes of the second test.
Yeah,
and it is critical what's going on right now.
Our starting point was, who won't be that interested in the GAA that we might be able to get on. We never thought about the Ashes.
And what you weren't aware of was at half time in Derry and Cork, as you were facing this way talking to Joe, the boys did put on cricket briefly there over your head.
So sorry, what is the state of play in the Ashes 2023? Is this an exciting Ashes? Like the last time I really got on board with it, Freddie Flintoff was locked outside Downing Street.
Okay. No, it is a very exciting Ashes. England have an incredibly exciting, dynamic team. Ben Stokes is their captain, who made a century today in kind of record time, like extraordinary batsman. And a kind of very clever, kind of despite his appearance, which is kind of slightly, not wide boy, but kind of, he doesn't look like, he's a very cerebral captain. And they've pursued this philosophy that's known as Baz Ball, which is named after their coach, Brendan McCullum. And I mentioned in the WhatsApp, it wouldn't be quite correct. It's like, is there parallels with the Stephen Kenny era in Irish football? Because Baz Ball is about kind of eliminating the draw from Test cricket and going to win as much as you can, trying to win a match as much as you can, but by taking the draw out of the equation, which comes with a fair degree of risk.
Okay. It's aggressive, making declarations, trying to do things. Now, it's controlled and it's meant to be intelligent risk. Yes. A better viewing spectacle.
Much better viewing spectacle, much more entertaining. But there is also, Stokes has a kind of, he gave an interview the day before the first test, which England lost. He gave an interview where he talked about how they would pursue this philosophy. And he said, and England have done very well with it. They've won most of their matches, which is maybe where it separates from the Stephen Kenny era. But they've done well with it. But the Ashes is a different thing. The Ashes is the real test. And he gave this interview before the test, and he said, well, we're going to pursue this philosophy, and we hope it does well. But if it doesn't, well.
Oh.
And you could hear the BBC kind of spluttering at this idea that this was how you would approach an Ashes series. And they lost the first test, and they are now, I don't know what's happened in the last hour, they're very unlikely to win the second test, which would mean in a best of 5 series that they would be in big trouble, really. But they also have kind of during the course of this test match kind of abandoned like the most extreme. They've first of all pursued the kind of Baz Ball idea into kind of crazy lengths, with just hitting ridiculous shots, not thinking,
almost like T20 style, go for it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that anyway in Test cricket now, but just kind of making bad decisions. And then yesterday there was this extraordinary day where both sides, but then Australia started, but then England took it up and just started bowling essentially just bouncers for the day. 97% of their balls yesterday were bouncers. Trying to get people. Well, bouncers is balls that are, basically balls into the body of the batsman on the leg side, trying to get them to hook or pull the ball. And you might do it occasionally, but to actually just have, now for people who don't like cricket, they might think this for me to say what I'm going to say next, it makes it quite boring as a spectacle, because they're just going into just one ball over and over again, trying to get people out that way. And
why is that not the done thing? Why is that not a go-to ball?
Well, it's a go-to ball occasionally, but it's just, there is, I suppose, like it has been, like, if the body line tour, like it is also seen as something you only do sparingly.
Why?
Because it's kind of, is it the way you like? Is it the way?
Ethical thing?
Is it that the way you really want to play cricket?
Oh, because you're flinging the ball at the man.
Well, at the now it wasn't hugely aggressive yesterday with England because their bowlers aren't fast enough. but and it's also just stifling the game. It's very, very a stifling philosophy. Bodyline which was the kind of seen as almost again another pivotal moment in the Ashes way back in 1929. Was England went to counter Don Bradman. They went to Australia and just bowled at the batsmen's bodies, and it became a huge.
It was seen as unbecoming.
It was a huge sporting, huge issue. Yeah. Now this wasn't seen like that, but Australia have their own. There's sort of plots within plots in this series, which make it fascinating. Australia don't like the idea of Baz Ball. They don't like this idea that England are this entertaining. Likeable team. That's not what Australia are about, and this is a likeable Australian team in itself. But they have come into this without just going to win it, and they have a ferocious bowling attack. And today, as I was coming in here watching this on the way in, there was a moment of kind of which actually ignited the day's play. The English batsman, the over finished. The English batsman walked out of his crease at the end, what he thought was the end of the over, and the Australian wicketkeeper rolled the ball, threw the ball at his stumps. He was outside his stumps. He was outside his crease, and the umpire gave him out.
Shane understood most of those words.
It was basically. This was seen as the crowd erupted booing, thinking they were chanting about Australia as cheating again.
All right, okay.
Because Australia had the famous sandpaper gate thing a couple of years ago.
Yes, the big scandal.
Watch the test on Amazon Prime. That's a great. That's a very good.
I must say, I certainly don't dislike cricket, but I think, am I right in saying your father imbued you with a great love?
Yeah.
So I don't have that. I was never introduced to it in that way, but even to. Let me bring it back to the paper review in terms of some of the writing. Like Jonathan Liu a couple of weeks ago in a rain delay wrote a stunning piece about his
that was incredible,
non-existent relationship with his father, which was just incredible, and then the broadcasting. I mean, I'm sure you associate summers with cricket commentary in the background test match special. Like, it does produce lovely coverage.
No, it does. No, it's wonderful. Like, that's the thing.
Is it still doing that?
It's still doing that, and actually I've there are still great cricket writers. Gideon Haigh, the Australian writer, who's a great writer. I'm currently reading my second. I've already lost one copy of his new book on the Ashes this summer, so I'm on my second copy of that. And he's a great writer on cricket, and but when you get into it it is an extraordinary thing once the obsession takes. Because I was even thinking about coming in today, it becomes the exact opposite of what the stereotype about cricket. Every ball today, when I was watching it, was just full of tension.
Right. And something.
You're just going. Everything hangs on this ball, and then it hangs on the next one, and everything
across hours.
And that's over, and then over days. So you're in the final day. I am for some reason sitting here on the final day after 4 days of this.
Not bitter about this at all.
I was suggesting we record this in the morning, by the way, if that makes you feel any better.
And then it's and building to this climax, but anyway. So that there is this act of what England now consider a lack of sportsmanship, getting Johnny Bairstow out today, has now turned it against Stokes. Then who was batting with great restraint because he's I've got to hold it all together. He then just turned around and scored 24 balls off following over effectively to get a century. Now, I don't know where
he's 151 not out.
Is he? Yeah. What's the score, Joe?
England needs 75 runs.
How many wickets
to
left?
Win the second test. 296 for 6.
They haven't lost any. That's incredible. That's absolutely
Shane,
incredible.
That's incredible.
Incredible.
I could have said there are 1,000 for 48. Shane would have said, "Oh yeah, interesting."
I'm impressed you knew the answer.
I need to find a reason to storm off.
If you are staring at a screen.
Okay, I appreciate you being here. This is I didn't realize this is actually terrible. I don't want to keep you from it. We've got to take a short break. We'll be back with the final thoughts on the final few pieces in just one moment.
This weekend on News Talk, we're partnering with retirement experts Standard Life to bring you an exciting opportunity to plan for your retirement, including a chance to win a luxury retreat for 2 at the Monarch, plus €400 in cash. See newstalk.com/Second Life for full details. Standard Life International DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
2 gig full fibre broadband from Virgin Media is rolling out to more homes across Ireland. Hear that, Aoife? Time to lose yourself in the latest Scandi crime series.
I have no idea what's going on here.
You should really put on the subtitles.
Fair point.
Whatever your genre, whatever way you play, Virgin Media is here. Switch today at virginmedia.ie or call in-store. Virgin Media. It's playtime.
Subject to location and availability.
Hi, I'm at the Garda station, but it's nothing. I told this girl I was seeing for a while that I'd put shots of her up online. Shots she sent me, so they're mine, really. I only said I'd do it, but the guards are saying that's a crime now. It's not my fault, Mum. I didn't do anything. I only said I would.
Threatening to share intimate images is a crime with serious consequences. Contact your local Garda station if you need to report it. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.
Do you have what it takes to make it in radio? Ever dreamed of making it as a presenter on your favourite station? Then we want to hear from you. Learning Wave Skillnet is recruiting for its nationally recognised radio presenter course. Apply now to learn how to research, produce and present great radio content and get real-life experience in a local, regional or national radio station. Make a demo and get on air. To find out more, visit learningwaves.ie now. Closing date for applications is the 6th of July. This course is funded by Learning Waves and Skillnet Ireland. Terms and conditions apply.
Right now at Power City, claim up to €300 cash back when you purchase selected Neff home appliances. To find out more, go online to powercity.ie.
Amazon Prime Day is the 11th and 12th of July. With 2 days of epic deals on electronics, home, kitchen and more, you'll feel like you've just won an award.
Wow! I didn't even prepare a speech. I'd like to thank my delivery driver for bringing my package so quickly. The other Amazon Prime members are...
Someone's feeling like a big deal. Amazon Prime Day is the 11th and 12th of July, exclusively for Prime members. Join Prime now.
On 106 to 108 FM, on the News Talk app, powered by Go Loud and smart speakers. This is News Talk.
Good afternoon from the newsroom. I'm Lindsay Dolan. Irish people travelling within France are being warned to use extreme caution while travelling in the country and stay away from any unrest. That's the advice from the Department of Foreign Affairs after a fifth night of sustained rioting following the death of a teenager who was killed by a police officer in the suburb northwest of Paris. 45,000 police officers and thousands of firefighters have been mobilised to enforce order, according to France's Interior Ministry. Paris-based journalist Laura Marlowe said some politicians have been targeted.
The thing that has shocked people most is an attack on the home of a mayor of a Paris suburb called La Haye-les-Roses. And the name of the mayor is Vincent Jeanbrun, and he's a spokesman for the Conservative Party. He was in his town hall when someone tried to drive a vehicle into his home and set fire to it. His wife and 2 children were sleeping in the house and escaped out the back into the garden where they hid.
The full details of the RTE payment scandal must come to light before any reforms can be made. And that's the warning from one communications expert. As some newspapers report, the government is already considering how to restructure the station. There are suggestions in today's Irish Mail that the government could split RTE's public and commercial operations in half and sell 2FM, resulting in hundreds of job losses. But Professor Jane Souter from DCU School of Communication says such discussion is extremely premature.
If you put in a new board and the first thing it has to do is separate the organisation out into 2 and do a fire sale of 2FM and have a row with the unions over making 400 people redundant, you won't actually have your focus on rebuilding the organisation and rebuilding trust.
Irish people spend on average €46.49 on takeaways every month. Just Eat's takeaway and food delivery report for 2023 has found customers order on average almost 3 takeaways a month. The estimated total annual expenditure on food delivery and takeaway orders in the Irish market is €2.2 billion. 9 out of 10 takeaways were found to be shared between 2 people, with less than 10% attributed to solo orders. And that's your news for now.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Cheer on the boys in green beating Scotland with Ryanair's low-fare flights to Paris in September.
breezy with sunny spells and scattered showers, highs of 14 to 18 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Now you're with Max. 10 minutes to go. Croke Park, Derry 110, Cork 16. Paddy Andrews, obviously I don't like to give you credit, but you've pretty much called this one perfectly.
I'm not home for my predictions, Joe, but I think we got this one relatively correct. It's been a bit better in the second half. Cork had a goal in 47 minutes from their fullback Rory Maguire, who's continued his free-flowing style from the back line over the last couple of weeks. A brilliant goal. He sneaks in behind the Derry defence and the ball is square to him, and he volleyball style palms the ball over Oran Lynch in the Derry goal. Brought it back to a point at that time with 47 minutes gone. The very next attack, Derry go up the pitch and get a goal of their own through Conor Doherty, and that kind of halts any sort of momentum that Cork were hoping to have. And that kind of since that point, Joe, Derry have had Cork at arm's length. Cork have just clipped over scores. The clock ticks 60 minutes. Their midfielder Colin Callahan gets his first of the day, so there's 10 minutes to go. It's 110 to 17, but Derry, as expected, just without doing too much, just keeping Cork at arm's length.
Very good, Paddy Andrews, thank you. We're here with Shane Keegan of Cobh Ramblers and Dion Fanning of the Free State podcast, going through the papers. I have 4 last quick ones that we chalked down to try and hit in no particular order. Nadine Doherty on the continued unhappiness of female GAA players in this country. Jonathan Wilson asking an interesting question: what is a football club? Nick Harris on the Olympics, and there's a piece on the bromance between Liam McHale and Kevin McStay, which is very good, and Shane picked that out. I will just, so the clock doesn't come against us, I will sum up the Olympics story in less than a minute, really. You might remember about 10 years ago, all hell broke loose around Russian doping at various Olympic Games, and then there was that documentary Icarus, which is still on Netflix, I think, and it felt like a lot of people watched, where it was just, in a way, it was like the grimmest thing you could imagine, but on the other hand it was just unbelievably exciting as the reality of the Russian plot around Sochi became apparent, where basically Grigory Rodchenko, with the help of the FSB they're called now, but the KGB, would build a tunnel and swap out the tainted urine for fake clean urine, and that was how Russia cleaned up at the Sochi Games. I mean, at the time it felt like, are Russia really up to this kind of stuff? With the benefit of 10 years, I mean, I think it's all far more believable in so many ways. But he's done an interview in the Mail on Sunday, just 10 years on from all that, and there was the famous McLaren report. And so basically, if you wondered where Rodchenko's ended up, he's very much in witness protection in the US. He has prosthetics, surgery, they wonder, but basically he looks incredibly different to the images you'd have of him from 10 years ago. He's 64 years of age. He says he'll never see his family again. He'll never go back to Russia again. And he doesn't think the sport, Olympic sports generally, are any cleaner either. He thinks Russia should have been banned 10 years ago. They weren't. It was all meaningless, and he wouldn't hold out too much faith that things are any better on the cheating front. And the guy who made the documentary with him, they came together because he's an amateur cyclist and he wanted to see if he doped, could he get much better. Kind of a crazy documentary in a way. But Brian Fogel, he says there's no happy ending for Grigory or for whistleblowers in general. It's likely he'll never see his family again. He also, like Rodchenko, flabbergasted that Russia was never banned properly for what they did. It is insanity that Russia has been able to continue competing. The International Olympic Committee has shown itself to be utterly corrupt. The Olympics have forever been tainted by the scandal, and on it goes in that vein. Walden, who was part of the report at the time, says there was a moment when the IOC could have changed things for the better for clean athletes by banning Russians. They chose not to. Other governing bodies are complicit. They want to make money. So it's all very grim across the way, really. The criticism of doping is that they go for quantity over quality. So they can say they do lots of tests, but none of them really have much of a chance of catching anybody who has a brain, I think, is their summation. Rodchenko says the underlying system for doping controls remains weak. Many innocent and clean athletes continue to be victimised by dirty ones, including those in state-sponsored doping regimes. He thinks that this Ukraine situation will be the end of Putin, and he's very hopeful of that. So not much of a silver lining in that piece. It was bad 10 years ago. He doesn't think it's much better.
And it's a familiar enough story in terms of like nothing being done, people getting away with things, people wanting to do no more than what is required to be seen to be doing something, rather than actually doing something. But there is, of course, the other, as is mentioned in the piece, like that it was the Sochi Games that emboldened Putin then to go and a few days later annex Crimea.
And I remember at the time people were, when this all came out, saying, well, God, if the Olympics aren't careful, people will really just abandon all faith and it'll just become a bit of a joke. I think 10 years on, anyone really who's anyway clued in looks at the Olympic Games and thinks, like...
But when it comes around, everyone, like, and we have people qualifying for the Olympics and all that, so there's still that allure of the Olympics. And it's funny, there's another piece on the next page in the Mail, I think, about why did the enhanced games not take off. And it's funny because we still want the pretense of what we're watching is real.
I feel like we get on the Irish bandwagon, celebrate that, and look at everything else with a sense of, well, I wouldn't trust it.
And it is such a pity, Joe, because if we had a 100% guarantee that everybody at the Olympics was completely drug free, it would be the greatest show on earth. Do you know what I mean? It is something we would absolutely love, but it's not that.
No, you feel like a mug saying, did you see the 1500 metres race last night? Wasn't it amazing? Well, that's where Rodchenko is. He's either had prosthetics or surgery, and he's somewhere in witness protection in the US, and he moves around the country. Do you remember that documentary and all that?
Yeah. It's very good.
We'll finish in Jonathan Wilson. The two GAA stories. You have Kevin McStay and Liam McHale open there, Shane. You really like this piece?
I did, yeah.
Two great fellas.
Yeah, and you were rightly making the point not to go too hard on Mayo Dublin stuff, but this isn't anything to do with Mayo Dublin. So it's not. This is the sort of piece that you could easily read at your leisure at any stage this week.
I should say, for my sake, not because I dislike Dublin or Mayo, just it will date by tomorrow.
That, yes. And it's built primarily on Dermot Crowe having a look back and building it on some of the passages from Kevin McStay's memoir, but it actually tells us far more about Liam McHale than it does about Kevin McStay. A couple of things I hadn't realised was Liam McHale was actually Kevin McStay's younger brother's best friend, and that's how the initial kind of relationship. He says, I ended up borrowing him from my brother Paul for a good portion of the last 20 years. The bond is strengthened then by the fact that McStay's sister Sinead is McHale's wife, so these two are really connected guys. But yeah, it's the insight into McHale's coaching and personality that I found really interesting in it. He is a guy that has kind of often caught my attention. I would tend to look past who the manager is quite often and see, well, who's the coach, who's the one on the pitch doing the stuff. And McHale absolutely extols Liam's credentials. Liam has a great basketball pedigree, and the complexities of that game allow him to view football team quite differently and with greater clarity than most. Now, that became very in vogue over the last decade or so, I suppose, Joe, but I mean, McHale was doing it way back before it became the hip thing to do, I suppose. He talks about how much of a likeable guy he is. He's always been a totally unlike any stereotype of a coach. It's very hard to describe how he does what he does, but he's brilliantly effective with the players. But Liam would never be seen with a flip chart or any other sort of paraphernalia. That very much reminded me of Eamon O'Shea. I've seen Eamon O'Shea coach a couple of times, and you come away from watching him coach and you're like, oh jeez, he's amazing. And then amazing at what? Well, it's just the way he kind of, throws out one-liners here or does a little something. It's very hard to pin it down, really, as to what it is that makes some of the great coaches, the really great coaches. I actually had forgotten just how strong that Mayo ticket is. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. Yeah. Liam McHale, Donny Buckley, Stephen Rochford, all on the one coaching ticket, all operating away under McStay. But yeah, it's I suppose his personality, even though they click extremely well, and this is always the thing with a management pairing, when I'm trying to find somebody to work with me at the League of Ireland or whatever, is trying to find somebody who's the yin to your yang, but yet you still fundamentally agree on the core kind of principles and the core philosophy behind it all. And he says here, Lee McHale, he was born quite naturally a good cop. I'm the other cop then because of that. So maybe Max Day isn't the natural bad cop, but needs to be because of McHale's strengths, I suppose. And the key line for me, which just is the exact phrase you want to be able to say about anybody that you're working with, is Liam has always had an easy confidence about him, and the truth of it is that when I am in his company, I am more confident about things working out.
Have you ever met McHale?
I haven't. My dad lived with his brother for quite a while in London, but I don't think I ever met Liam, no.
I think you'd love him as well, actually.
Really, yeah.
He is just the best.
Yeah.
He's such a great fella, honestly. He'd be my sporting hero growing up.
Really? Yeah.
My mum's from Ballina, so I spent a lot of time in Ballina. There's pictures of me from Yay High with Liam McHale.
Really?
And then getting to work on the show. Meet your heroes is my advice on the back of McHale, because he's just so lovely and charismatic and gentle. And McStay says something there. I've never heard Liam McHale say a bad word about anyone in my life.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you ring, like Liam wears shorts 365 days a year, and like ring him to come on the show sometimes. He's like, oh yeah, I was just swimming in the Atlantic with my dog.
One of those.
He's living his best life, I think. Really,
yeah, nothing rattles him. I mean, they do pass the comment here that, look, if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. He ain't going to get too stressed about it one way or another, which is a trait I would absolutely love to have, but certainly don't have.
Yeah. So Nadine Doherty on page 11 of Sunday Independent carries on this story from last week. We're seeing more protests at GAA games across the country. Notably, it is, and I think it is notable that the men haven't actually supported this protest.
She's calling them out on that here. She really is.
I think when you see it in those terms, it's probably hard enough for the male players. They don't have to make a specific statement, i.e. we want the GAA to suddenly pony up and pay the cost of the charter, or we think integration has to happen by 2025. It doesn't have to be a specific statement, but it could simply be a statement of we support you and we hear you. And in case anyone's not following the ladies football situation, but they do come to these male matches, here's a t-shirt that says equality or unity for all.
And I mean, she puts that across very well just by just the line of, it is expected that a total of 150,000 supporters will attend this weekend's All-Ireland quarter-finals. It's likely that there'll be 5,000 at women's matches over the same period.
Yeah.
The level of exposure this would get, I get the point she's making there. The level of exposure, is astronomical.
She does make the point. So the GAA, I think, increasingly are going to look at this and say, well, we're just not handing over money when we're at such an early stage of integration talks, is my sense.
Yeah.
Because what if talks break down and do we continue to pay the bill forever, or do we pull out, and all the
completely
complications?
Understandable stance by the GAA.
I think it is. It's not an easy situation, but I think it is. So Nadine Doherty makes the point, what the GAA do with their money is entirely their own choice. They're under no obligation to show any charity to their female counterparts, meaning there is now an obligation on our government to intervene and work with the LGFA and Camogie Association on how funding can be allocated to facilitate a squad charter. So maybe it will be governmental. I've seen points as well about there's going to be a big charity push. Maybe charity is the wrong word. Fundraising, and like there's no shame in that, because I mean, geez, they're all off in New York on the men's side raising huge sums of money. So maybe the LGFA and Camogie need to go to New York and raise their own money and look after their players that way. So either way, I think it probably has to get sorted, because the protests, this just can't continue into next year.
Yeah, look, very much so. And like it's very, very easy to just completely take Nadine's side here. It's the easier thing to do is to say, like, sure, it's a no-brainer that they have to be getting parity. And I mean, she very, very cleverly, goes about making her point by throwing out an example of as a parent, can you imagine the following scenario? You send your little girl and her brother off for a week to the cool camp, and your boy comes home with the gear and the kit, and the girl doesn't get that either, or doesn't get either. The boy trains on a pitch while the girl has to train on a patch of grass at the side of the car park. It's a clever way of putting it. It doesn't, unfortunately, make any kind of address of the fact that, well, where is the money coming in from? And again, I suppose I'm now working out of the Centre of Excellence in Laois that we're lucky to have. There's 3 pitches, right? I can tell you, Joe, on pretty much every given night of the week, all 3 of those pitches are in full use. The hurlers, the senior hurling team might be training on one pitch, the senior football team might be training on another pitch, and there'll be some sort of underage game or club game going on the third pitch. and that's pretty much all male sports. Now, if Laois made the decision in the morning that they wanted to give parity, to the women immediately, like how does that work? Like the actual pitch space genuinely isn't there. There's a huge logistical issue as to how, even if the willingness and want is there, which it should be, how do you actually make this work?
Well, I think it's for that reason and many others that the likes of Dr. Katie Liston and Conor Myler and Dr. Aoife Lane are saying, well, this could be a 5-year thing.
I don't understand fully why the GAA are getting, I don't know if they're getting a pass, but why they shouldn't be, if they are talking about integration. Okay, you can say these aren't our members, but like that's a kind of that's almost like an administrative point. Like when you say this, it's when you talk about the pitches, the same thing. Like you either believe in, like it just has to. These things have to be affected. They have to be kind of done because. Like that's the way you look at the Irish women's team in the World Cup. Look at where the momentum is going, even in terms of interest and stuff. It is going to grow. Now maybe the GAA is different in that, but like in Irish terms, I think the amount of interest is growing in football, in soccer, in the women's team, tells you which way the wind is blowing on these things. And I don't know how long you can, she does say it, what the GAA do with that money is their own choice. And they are under obligation to any charity to their female counterparts. But like, they're the same games. Like who's going to, like they're under different administrative umbrellas, but they're playing the same games. But
they're very different administrative umbrellas. Yeah, but like the kickback, whether we like it or not, the kickback from GAA people would be, so taking my example of the only way to free up pitch space in the Centre of Excellence for them to come in and train on or play on is to remove people who are currently on it. So are we removing members from our facilities to allow non-members use of our facilities? I know that might sound a bit like, no, I understand it, but that's what I mean. It gets bogged.
No, I accept that totally. But at the same time, it's like, well, there's something flawed if that's if that's what it's come to, and it will come to that. But look, this is. I actually think that, again, when anyone ever talks about this, and my son plays for a soccer club in Dublin, and like everything, like we're looking at next season, and it's like, where are we going to play? We've got so many players. There's so many teams we want to put out. Where are we going to play? And until actually, and this is never going to happen, so I might as well throw it, until Irish sport actually is organised in a way that is beyond like each narrow vested interest and says, right, let's get facilities for everything, and let's share these facilities in a meaningful way, and let's take the that sort of territorial side of it out of it. And actually somehow do something. Like nothing's going to change because every sport is organised on this self-defeating principle that we give nothing. Our starting point is we give nothing to anybody else.
And I know I'm arguing against myself here in saying, like, they're 100% taking the right stance because they, something has got to change. The conditions that they're expecting to be operating under are absolutely ridiculous. I suppose the point I'm just not making is there isn't an easy fix. Nobody should think that there's an easy fix.
You're dead right to raise that point because I think on a macro level everyone's in agreement. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What happens to that pitch on Tuesday? And that's where the cooperation will be tested. I think it's interesting to take your point, Dion. So say the GAA say, look, we're not doing that until talks are complete, and we're coming to these talks in good faith, and if it takes a year or 2 or 3, that's the way it's going to be. It might be interesting if government say, well, look, to Dion's point, we're giving X to Gaelic games at large. Given that the integration isn't happening as hastily as we would like, and given that you guys have millions and you guys don't have anything, we're going to stop funding you all that money, and we're going to direct that to the women's game, because it does kind of seem like you can stand on your own 2 feet, GAA. You don't pay your players and you're doing remarkably well, and GAA goes a big success. So the government might step in and say, we just can't have this. We need parity on like, again, these are basics. The charters are basics.
It does come back to a bit of what the FAI's recent plan, and looking for the money they're looking for. But a lot of they stressed on that. A lot of it was for facilities that would be used for all sports, and that's the way. That's the way it has, for obvious historical reasons. That's not the way sport has been organised in Ireland. But I know people, where I am, like people involved in teams who brought up in different countries, and they're like, this is kind of crazy. This is crazy.
And isn't it lovely when you go to like a French town and the municipal sports centre is there with pitches and swimming pools, and everyone uses it, and it just makes a lot of sense. Especially small towns in Ireland having the soccer pitches down there and our clubhouses up here.
Say about that, and also and you'll talk to things being scheduled against each other.
Yeah.
So that you can't actually do
quite often their own worst enemies.
Two of the worst organisations for that are the Camogie Association versus the LGFA.
Yeah.
Honestly. Don't be under the illusion that the GAA are great. The two female and the two female have great relations, and it's 1 versus 2. It's like 1 versus 1 versus 1 half the time.
And like the thing and this is Shane would know this better than anyone. Like the thing that needs to be stressed in that kind of territorial grab for players almost is that you're actually the more sports anybody plays, the better for all of them, for their development. Like that, every study has shown that. That if you go and trying to grab one player and say, we want you for soccer, or we want you for Gaelic football, or for hurling, or whatever.
You want a good penalty taker in your GAA team.
Very, very quickly on that one, Joe. Our 15s yesterday were hurling against Dublin 15s in the Centre of Excellence, and as I came in, there was
Laois versus Dublin.
Laois against Dublin under 15. As I came in, with one of the midfielder for Dublin scored an absolutely outstanding goal and continued to be the best player on the pitch. He came across at half time and took off his helmet. I went, I know that face, and I did a quick Google. The guy's name is Billy O'Neill. He scored a hat-trick for Ireland under 15s against Wales last month in soccer.
God, I hate him.
Best hurler on the pitch yesterday by country miles.
It's disgusting.
We won't get into cricket's roots for hurling in this country, how they laid the foundation.
I think we all agree, let's not fund cricket, let's not go crazy. Right, we have 5 minutes to try and sum up what's a very nuanced, thoughtful piece. So Jonathan Wilson, it's in The Observer, Sunday Independent out as well. Soccer has become an exploited commodity. The first sentence of his piece, what is a football club? One of those questions seems simple, turns out to be extremely difficult to answer, he says, and he charts the history from mid to late 19th century, and then it becomes apparent people will pay in to watch, and they'll be partisan, they'll support teams. Provincial self-assertion was the great driver of early football. Factory owners, mine bosses funded clubs from the industrial cities of the English North and Midlands looking to elevate their home through football. That led to the beginnings of a disconnect, obviously. 1981 is interesting. Until 1981, dividends were capped at 7.5%. No director could be paid by the club. Clubs were not seen as profit-making entities. 1981, that changed. I hadn't realised that. And, then we're into just the mad world we're into now, where there are substantial dividends and there is sports washing and there are a whole array of complications. He says, as traditional industries have declined, the football club's role as emblems of their community have become increasingly important. They offer a nostalgic link to the past generations. He says modern football clubs are also vehicles for the profit of an outsider, whether that is economic or political. And he kind of finishes by touching on multiple ownership, which is now like a new frontier, I think. It was complicated enough 10 years ago, but now multiple ownership. He says that has really brought the issue of what a club should be into focus. He says it's impossible to truly be Strasbourg if you're also part of Greater Chelsea, or it's impossible to be truly Palermo if you're part of City Football Group. In them, it's is laid bare the bifurcated nature of the modern club. They are vessels for memory and emotion, ciphers for often profound feelings of belonging and identity, and yet at the same time they are businesses governed by the whims of the very rich. That is the problem of modern football. Everything is bought and sold, even that sense of communal identity. The vital force that's driven the game for a century and a half has become just another commodity to be traded and exploited. So I'm guessing Jonathan Wilson doesn't love where the modern football club is, or what is a modern football club, Dion?
Well, I don't think anybody loves where the modern football club is. Well, that's not true. There's plenty of people on Twitter who disprove that. Newcastle fans, Manchester City fans, who seem entirely happy yet incredibly angry at their lot. So I think it's a depressing piece, really. In and it goes back to, we talk about, like he talks about there, he says Sheikh Mansour is not investing in Manchester nor Saudi Arabia's public investment fund in Newcastle out of the goodness of their hearts. And again we come back to like that Saudi kind of grab for sport that is kind of overshadowing so much of sport today. But I don't know, like there is no, are you being simply just a nostalgist if you look back now? Because there is no going back. Like, you talk about 1981, and it's funny how many things in how many areas, like deregulation, the economy,
it really
all
is.
These things that happened around that period,
and the unforeseen consequences, perhaps.
Yeah, and it's hard to while football in many ways, everyone gets sucked into transfers and the season starting, and yet it becomes harder and harder when you see Manchester City doing what they've done, when you see Newcastle rising, and you see the appetite among a large section of Manchester United fans for the Qatar takeover, because that's the solution they see to it. That you kind of think, well, where is the place for just any kind of sort of idealism or kind of innocent view of sport now. And I think he gets to it here. Like, there is an argument, like it is worse. And I'm not saying this is just a continuation. I'm not making I'm not going to make some kind of version of the Padraig Harrington argument about Ireland and Saudi Arabia. But like, there is always a tension, as he lays out, between the professional and the merchant class who own football clubs, and as he says, the communities. They were never owned by the people who they meant so much to, or words to that effect. Like, and that was always the tension within football. But it's now, of a totally different level. Like,
I haven't loved the wealthy billionaire owner or the state owner of the last decade, but where even I can't. At least that was an extension of Jack Walker. It's just much, much richer. But like this notion that they have a whole portfolio of clubs all around the world, like the notion of City Football Group, for me, I'm just like, this whole thing is just nonsense now.
Why does that? I don't. Why does that? In particular, I'm not going to disagree with you, but why does that? Like,
it's not romantic, but at least I like the idea of all these football clubs are competing against each other in a very true way,
independent of each other,
totally independent of each other. Whereas like these clubs now hoovering up all the talent in London, sharing them out, farming them out to their other 10 clubs, dodging financial fair play as a result, bringing them back as they choose, completely crushing the opposition therefore in London and wherever they're farming the clubs out. And like then, like, you're pretty similar kind of like similar clubs in knockout stages, Champions League or Champions League group stages, and you're like, well, I can't lose either way because we're all of City Football Group, and like all Sefrin and UEFA can say is, the horse probably bolted on that one.
Yeah.
At least if it was a bunch of rich folk fighting it out, at least they'd still be fighting it out. I now need to check who
billionaire versus billionaire rather than
state v state.
Billionaires, two toys playing each other.
Look, state, even
but
if,
I think
even
one
if
of the things
it
does it also, but it does just the one of the comforting myths, and you saw this around when the Super League, which I think like the Super League as they attempted it was so flawed and so badly planned that actually, but as time goes on, you're going, there was a way of doing that actually made sense.
Better logo,
Tottenham probably not being in it. A couple of. I'm sorry, Shane. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but like. One of the things people were talking about, the football pyramid, then this shatters the football pyramid. That football pyramid was a lie.
I know.
And the one thing I'll say, and I agree with you about multi-club ownership, but the one thing it does is it kind of just points out that, again, just underlines what a lie the football pyramid is, because you're almost saying, like, this club that we own here will never in a million years can dream of actually really all you are. This is your place in the world, and and again, now that's what's wrong with it. But it is actually just dealing in an ultra pragmatic way by saying this is your role in life. To host players for us, to develop them for us, to do things for us, and you can ask for no more.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's true.
We've now got a version of that in Ireland.
Yeah,
Hull owning Shelbourne.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next year, because we've got a great barometer of it in Damien Duff, because if Duff has been told this is how we do it at Hull, so this is how you have to do it, he'll take that quietly, will he? No. By God, he will not.
Fellas, we're out of time. Thank you so much. So Shane Keegan of Cobh Ramblers and Dion Fanning of the Free State podcast, thank you both very much for coming in. Derry have beaten Cork by 4 points. We'll be across to Paddy Andrews in just a moment. He's at Croke Park ahead of Dublin Mayo as well.
Off the ball on News Talk. News Talk Breakfast.
We heard on the show why Finland is the happiest place in the world.
They have quite a lot of sayings around the idea of happiness, such as happiness always ends in tears.